The idea of ketchup being sold as medicine feels strange today. You grab a bottle from the fridge, squirt it on your fries, and that's it. No one thinks about curing anything with it. But the story of ketchup, what it was and what it became, is pretty long and winding. It goes back a lot further than you might guess, and it took some interesting turns, including a brief moment when people really did try to sell something like it as a health cure. But to understand that, you have to go back to the very beginning, to a time before tomatoes were even part of the picture. The word ketchup doesn't sound English, and that's because it isn't. It comes from the Far East. The very first versions of what we now call ketchup had nothing to do with tomatoes, or even with the sweet, tangy sauce we know today. They were a completely different thing, a savory, fermented sauce used to flavor food. Think of it more like a strong, salty fish sauce or a kind of brine. The origin of ketchup is usually traced back to a sauce called Ketchup in Fujian, a coastal province in China. This was a fermented fish sauce. People in that region used fish guts, fish scraps, and other seafood mixed with salt and let it ferment. This process broke down the proteins, creating a rich, savory liquid. It was packed with umami, a deep, meaty flavor that makes food taste better. For people living near the ocean, it was a way to preserve food and add a powerful taste to their meals, especially rice or bland vegetables. It was very common in that part of the world. From China, this idea of a fermented sauce spread to other parts of Southeast Asia. You can still find sauces called ketchup in places like Malaysia and Indonesia today. These can be soy-based or fish-based, but the word itself points back to that original concept of a thick, savory flavoring. When European traders and sailors started traveling to Asia in the 17th and 18th centuries, they came across these sauces. The British in particular were active in the region. They tasted these unique flavors and liked them. The umami was something new and exciting to their palates, so British sailors and merchants brought bottles of ketchup back to England. It was seen as an exotic ingredient, a way to add an interesting kick to food that was often quite plain. But here's the thing, once it arrived in England, people didn't have the same fish or the same fermentation techniques. They couldn't easily recreate the original Asian fish sauce, so they started to experiment. English cooks, being resourceful, tried to make their own versions of this savory sauce using ingredients they had on hand. This is where ketchup started to change. Instead of fish, early English ketchups used other strong flavored ingredients that could also be preserved or fermented. Popular choices included mushrooms, walnuts, and even oysters or anchovies. These were all foods that could give a deep, rich flavor. For example, mushroom ketchup was very popular. People would boil down mushrooms, add salt, spices like mace, ginger, cloves, and pepper, and then let it sit, sometimes for weeks. The result was a dark, thin, very savory liquid. Walnut ketchup was another common type, made by pickling walnuts and then pressing them to extract their dark, tangy liquid. These early European ketchups were not sweet at all. They were spicy, salty, and acidic, designed to boost the flavor of meat dishes, stews, or even a simple piece of toast. They were condiments, pure and simple. They helped make food more palatable, especially during times when fresh ingredients were scarce or when people wanted to mask the taste of food that might not be perfectly fresh. They also had some preservative qualities due to the salt and vinegar, which was important before refrigeration. But no one was thinking of these mushroom or walnut ketchups as medicine. They were for taste, for enjoyment, and for enhancing a meal. They were a culinary innovation, not a pharmaceutical one. The idea that these specific sauces would cure an illness wasn't part of their story. They were just tasty additions to the dinner table. And remember, during all this time, the tomato, the main ingredient we associate with ketchup today, was still nowhere near the picture. It had its own journey to make before it ever got close to a ketchup bottle. The tomato, the star of modern ketchup, had a much different start than the fermented fish sauces of Asia. Tomatoes are native to the Americas, specifically the Andes region of South America. They were cultivated by indigenous people for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. When Spanish conquistadors came to the Americas in the 16th century, they found these fruits, and they brought them back to Europe. But when tomatoes first arrived on European soil, they were met with a lot of suspicion and even fear. Imagine a new, brightly colored fruit, different from anything people had seen before. The first tomatoes in Europe were often small and yellow, not the big red ones we know. They looked pretty, but there was a big problem. Tomatoes are part of the nightshade family, the Solanaceae family. This family also includes some very poisonous plants like deadly nightshade itself. People in Europe knew about these dangerous plants and were very wary of anything that looked similar. So, when tomatoes showed up, Many assumed they were poisonous too. For a long time, Europeans generally thought tomatoes were toxic. Wealthier people who ate off pewter plates had an extra reason to be cautious. This pewter has a high lead content. The acidity of tomatoes could leach lead from the plates, leading to lead poisoning. People would get sick after eating tomatoes, not because the tomatoes themselves were poisonous, but because of the chemical reaction with their plates. This only confirmed their fears. As a result, tomatoes were mostly grown as ornamental plants for centuries. They were admired for their beauty in gardens, but rarely eaten. They were sometimes called love apples in France and England purely for their aesthetic appeal, not for their taste or health benefits. Slowly, this fear started to fade. In warmer parts of Europe, especially Italy and Spain, people were less suspicious. Perhaps their cooking methods or different types of pottery reduced the lead issue. Or maybe they were just more adventurous. Tomatoes began to be incorporated into local cuisines, first as ingredients in soups and stews, and eventually becoming central to dishes like pizza and pasta sauces. Their popularity grew because they added a unique flavor and richness to food. As tomatoes became more accepted as food, people started to think about their properties. Some believed they had aphrodisiac qualities, hence the love apple nickname. Others, as they became more common, began to speculate about their health effects. In the early 19th century, as scientific understanding slowly advanced, though still mixed with a lot of folk wisdom, the idea of fruits and vegetables having specific health benefits became more popular. People looked for natural remedies, and if tomatoes were now safe to eat, perhaps they could also be good for you. This is where the story of ketchup and medicine starts to get tangled. Once tomatoes were seen as food, it wasn't long before someone tried to make a tomato-based ketchup. Early tomato ketchup recipes appeared in cookbooks in the early 19th century in America. These recipes were a blend of the existing ketchup tradition spices, vinegar, salt, with the newly accepted tomato fruit. They were still savory and tangy, and probably not as sweet as modern ketchup. These were still primarily condiments meant to add flavor to food. But the stage was set for someone to take the next step and promote the tomato itself, and therefore tomato products, as something more than just tasty. The shift in perception from poisonous ornament to edible, potentially beneficial food was crucial for the next chapter in ketchup's story. It created an opening for people to start making bold claims about the tomato's power. Here's where the idea of ketchup as medicine really comes into play, but it's important to understand the nuance. It wasn't exactly the liquid sauce we think of today that was sold as medicine. It was more about the tomato itself and then specific tomato extracts sold in a medicinal format. The story often begins with a man named Dr. John Cooke Bennett. He was an American physician who lived in the early 19th century. In 1830, he published a recipe for a tomato ketchup, but he didn't just share a recipe for a tasty condiment. He made some very strong claims about the health benefits of tomatoes. Dr. Bennett stated that tomatoes could cure a range of ailments, including indigestion, diarrhea, and even jaundice. He called them medicinal properties and truly believed in their therapeutic power. Why would a doctor make such claims? In the 1830s, medical science was very different. There wasn't the rigorous testing and understanding we have today. Many doctors relied on observations, folk remedies, and sometimes a bit of wishful thinking. Natural remedies were very popular, and if a plant was newly accepted as safe to eat after centuries of fear, it wasn't a huge leap for some to then claim it had healing powers. People were often looking for simple cures for common problems, and a widely available fruit like the tomato seemed like a promising candidate. Now, Dr. Bennett published a recipe and promoted the general health benefits of eating tomatoes or tomato-based ketchup. But he didn't really commercialize a medicine himself in a big way. That's where another individual stepped in and turned the idea into a full-blown commercial venture, Archibald Miles. Archibald Miles was an entrepreneur and, like many others of his time, saw an opportunity in the burgeoning patent medicine industry. This was an era when all sorts of concoctions were sold with grand claims, often without much scientific backing. Miles founded the Dr. Miles Compound Extract of Tomato. This wasn't liquid ketchup in a bottle. These were pills. He processed tomatoes, likely extracted certain components, and turned them into tablets that he then marketed as a powerful cure-all. Miles capitalized heavily on Dr. Bennett's claims and the public's growing interest in natural remedies. He advertised his tomato pills as capable of curing everything from upset stomachs and indigestion to more serious conditions. He painted them as a marvel of nature, harnessing the inherent healing power of the tomato. His marketing was aggressive and widespread. He sold these pills through various channels, and they became quite popular. It's important to understand what was likely in those pills. While they contained tomato extract, they also probably contained other ingredients. Many patent medicines of the era included laxatives, alcohol, or even mild opiates. These ingredients would certainly produce some kind of noticeable effect on the body, which people might interpret as healing or working. If you took a pill that made you go to the bathroom, you might think it was clearing out your system and making you feel better, even if the tomato itself wasn't doing much. So while tomatoes were the headline ingredient, the actual efficacy might have come from other, less advertised components. So, yes, a form of tomato product, specifically tomato extract in pill form, was indeed sold as medicine. This is the direct link to the claim that ketchup was originally sold as medicine. It wasn't the ketchup sauce itself, but a medicinal derivative based on the tomato's supposed healing properties. These pills were very much part of the patent medicine craze of the 19th century, a time when medical regulation was virtually non-existent and people bought into grand claims of cures for all sorts of ailments. This period highlights a fascinating, if somewhat misleading, chapter in the history of the tomato and its transformation into a commercial product, whether food or supposed medicine. The stage was set for a confrontation between these kinds of claims and real scientific understanding, which would eventually push ketchup firmly back into the realm of food. The era of patent medicines and exaggerated health claims for tomato pills didn't last forever. As the 19th century turned into the 20th, a new scientific understanding began to emerge, especially regarding food and public health. This shift had a big impact on ketchup, pushing it away from dubious medical claims and firmly establishing it as a popular food condiment. The main challenge for tomato ketchup, if it was going to be a widely available product, was preservation. Tomatoes spoil very quickly. In the early days of commercial ketchup production, before refrigeration and modern food science, manufacturers faced a dilemma. They wanted to make ketchup year-round, but fresh tomatoes were only available seasonally. This meant they had to rely on a lot of preservatives, and some of these were not good at all. Many early commercial ketchups were made from unripe tomatoes, or even tomato waste, which gave them a poor flavor. To cover this up, and to make the product last, manufacturers added all sorts of things. Sometimes they used artificial colors, like coal tar dyes, to make the ketchup look redder. They also used chemical preservatives like sodium benzoate, formaldehyde, and even borax. These chemicals allowed the ketchup to be bottled and stored for long periods, but they often came at the expense of taste and, more importantly, public health. Consumers bought these products without knowing what was truly inside them. There was little regulation. As people became more aware of food quality and safety, a movement for food purity began to grow. This movement culminated in important legislation, like the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 in the United States. This act was a landmark. It aimed to stop the sale of misbranded or adulterated food and drugs. It forced manufacturers to list ingredients and to ensure their products were safe. This law was a direct challenge to the patent medicine industry and to food producers who used harmful chemicals. This is where Henry Heinz enters the story. H.J. Heinz Company became a giant in the food industry, and Heinz played a critical role in shaping what ketchup became. Unlike many of his competitors, Heinz was an early advocate for food purity. He believed in using high-quality ingredients and natural preservation methods. He pushed for ripe red tomatoes, which not only tasted better but also contained more natural sugars and acids that aided preservation. He also insisted on a higher vinegar content in his ketchup. Vinegar is a natural preservative. By using more vinegar and more sugar, which also helps preserve, Heinz found a way to create a stable, delicious ketchup without resorting to the harmful chemical preservatives that others were using. Heinz's commitment to quality was revolutionary. He famously used clear glass bottles for his ketchup, which was a bold move at the time. Most companies use dark bottles to hide the often unappetizing color of their questionable products. Heinz, by contrast, wanted to show off the vibrant red of his naturally made ketchup. This transparency built trust with consumers. His efforts, alongside the new food safety laws, helped to clean up the ketchup industry. Ketchup became synonymous with quality and safety, a far cry from the potentially harmful concoctions of earlier days. During this period, the scientific understanding of nutrition also advanced. Doctors and scientists began to understand diseases better and moved away from the idea of cure-all remedies like tomato pills. The focus shifted to specific treatments and to a more holistic understanding of diet and health. This meant that the brief flirtation with tomato extract as medicine faded into the background. Ketchup, now a reliable and safe food product, was firmly established as a condiment, not a cure. It was something people enjoyed for its taste, not for its supposed healing powers. The battle for pure food was won, and ketchup emerged as a delicious, trustworthy addition to the table. So, what about ketchup today? It's pretty clear no one buys a bottle of Heinz or any other brand expecting it to cure their indigestion or clear up jaundice. Ketchup, has completely shed any lingering associations with medicine. It's just a condiment, pure and simple, and one of the most popular ones in the world. The ketchup we know today is a sweet and tangy sauce. It's made primarily from ripe tomatoes, vinegar, sugar, salt, and a blend of spices. The exact recipe might vary a bit between brands, but the core ingredients are consistent. It's thick, smooth, and has a distinctive flavor profile that makes it a perfect partner for so many foods, especially savory ones like French fries, hot dogs, and hamburgers. Its journey from a fermented fish sauce to a sweet tomato condiment is quite remarkable. Its global popularity is huge. Ketchup is found in kitchens and restaurants all over the world. It's a staple in many cultures, sometimes even used in cooking beyond just being a table sauce. The standardization of its recipe, largely influenced by companies like Heinz and the demands of food safety, means that you can generally expect a consistent product no matter where you are. This reliability helped it become a household name. Now, while no one views ketchup as medicine, there's sometimes talk about the health benefits of tomatoes themselves. Tomatoes contain lycopene, an antioxidant that some studies suggest might have health benefits, like reducing the risk of certain diseases. And cooking tomatoes, as in ketchup, actually makes the lycopene more bioavailable, meaning your body can absorb it better. So, a serving of ketchup does deliver some lycopene, but here's the crucial distinction: these are nutritional benefits, not medicinal claims. No one is saying ketchup is a treatment for an illness. They're saying tomatoes have good things in them, and ketchup is a way to get some of those good things. It's like saying oranges have vitamin C. You eat an orange for nutrition, not as a prescription for a disease. The sugar and salt content in most ketchups also mean it's best enjoyed in moderation, like any other condiment. So, while tomatoes themselves are healthy, ketchup isn't a health food, it's a flavorful addition. In the end, the answer to the question, was ketchup originally sold as medicine, is a bit complex. The word ketchup definitely started with something that was just a food, a savory sauce from Asia. When tomatoes entered the picture, and especially in the 19th century, a brief period saw tomato extracts in pill form marketed aggressively as a medicine. This was thanks to entrepreneurs who took advantage of folk beliefs and a lack of regulation. But this was a detour, a specific moment in time driven by the patent medicine industry. The liquid ketchup we know and love, the sweet tangy sauce made from ripe tomatoes, was never truly sold as a medicine. It was developed and popularized as a condiment, a delicious flavor enhancer for food. The medicinal claims were about tomato pills, not the sauce in the bottle. So when you squeeze ketchup onto your burger today, you're not thinking about curing anything. You're just enjoying a taste that has traveled through centuries and across continents, evolving from a simple fish brine to the iconic red sauce we all recognize. It's a great example of how food culture changes over time, sometimes in surprising and unexpected ways.